good refreshment at the coffee. So this session is basically based on how to start your startup. It is at the same time very exciting to start a startup and might be, if you don't know enough information, very depressing. So in this session, for the scientists, we'd like to show you first how to start a startup. And then we will go with the different aspects that how to acquire more funding. So we have speakers from Austrian Business Agency, Vienna Business Agency, and how to deal with the IP or patent issues from ISTQ, and then what service as an organization MCAA could provide you. So our chair of Bridging Business and Science would talk about that. And after that, we will have a panel discussion. So I would say roughly 1 hour it will be the presentation, and then we will start the panel discussion. So our first speaker tonight is Patricia. Today is Patricia, who is a marine scientist and also a member of our association. She's a co-founder of Oceanogamy, if I pronounce it right. And she has a background in marine science and biodiversity and has a PhD. Over a decade, she managed projects and collaborated with different NGOs, private sector, and academia in different marine science, I think some of you were yesterday's session, so you probably know about a bit. So she will talk about her Oceanogamy and how actually she started the startup and everything. So the floor is yours. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mustafa. First, I wanted to apologize because the day before yesterday, my computer broke, so I made a last-minute presentation with my phone. I learned a new skill now, how to make a presentation in one night with a phone. So I have just 1 year of experience with my startup, which I started last February, so yeah, 1 year and something ago, yeah. Yeah, it has been really exciting experience. I learned a lot, and I wanted to share that with you for the people who is thinking to start a startup, and so to motivate you more to. So don't be scared and jump from the tank to the ocean. So I will talk briefly about Oceanogamy, but very briefly because actually I talked about it yesterday. And this is a marine environmental consultancy company, and we work for ocean sustainability and responsibility. We are now focused on the plastics issue, marine plastics, and how to engage companies to find effective solutions for this issue, companies and citizens as well. And I'm based in Barcelona, so we organize most of the activities in Barcelona. First of all, so I wanted to ask you a question that I asked already yesterday, but I'm curious, how many people are you thinking now to start a startup? Could you raise your hands? Okay, quite a lot, yeah, nice. And okay, so if you're thinking about your startup, and there are some things that I believe is important to consider. And one of them is, what is the real motivation that you would like to, for what you would like to create your startup? So what really motivates you? Do you have maybe a great idea that you want to implement, and you think this is unique and you really want to implement it? Or maybe it's because you want to learn something new, going out of the research field, do something maybe more apply. And so all these things are important, because when you start, you have to keep thinking on this motivation, what really motivates you to keep going, because sometimes you are very motivated, sometimes not, so it's like doing a PhD. The other thing is how do you see yourself and your company in the next years? So maybe you see it, so in my case, for example, I see, and I'm very optimistic, so I see an international marine consultancy working in different marine environmental problems. So this is important to think about it also when are you designing your company or your startup, and how you would like to be recognized for that. Then, as I was saying before, maybe you were wondering about if I have the skills to start a startup, and I can assure you that all of you have it for sure, because if I made it. So, yeah, when you are doing your PhD, you are learning many skills that are relevant for a startup or for a business. So there are many shared things that you learn. Basic, so for example, to work in a team, to be creative, to do networking, to be international, to do project management, budget management. So all these things that you are learning, all these skills are very useful for the startup. And maybe you don't realize now, but when you are starting, you're like, okay, I know how to do that. Yeah, this is similar then, yeah. So, another thing is that I wanted to talk about is, so how do you bring to life your idea? So you imagine that you have an amazing idea, and when you think it's amazing and it's unique, so how do you arrive to implement it? This is a difficult question, I don't know how to answer exactly. But one of the things that I learned during this year is that maybe you have an idea that you think is the best, and then later it changed to something completely different. So you have to be very open to change your idea and to evolve it. And it's important also to share your idea with the others. So, like when I was starting working, so in my consultancy, I have a business partner, and he has amazing ideas, always. But some of them are too crazy, some of them are good, so you have to also to evaluate which ones are good or not. But the thing is that sometimes he was saying me, no, I don't want to share this idea, I want to keep it for me because it's a great idea. I'm like, if we don't share it, we are not going to implement it, we are not going to evolve it. So it's good. Depends on the things, you can keep them, but when you share your idea with the others, you are making it better. Okay, yeah. This is longer, so I'm going to take a short break. So. So one of the things that I learned, I joined several, in Barcelona, there is a lot of startups. So, and there's a lot of help for startups. And I learned now that in Vienna as well. So it's very good if you are in a city where they promote startups, because you are learning a lot. Not only from the other startups, but also from the help from the government that they give you to provide you the skills that you need and the contacts that you need. And in one of these trainings that I did in Barcelona, I learned in 1 week how to develop the basic idea to make the final idea. And it has changed a lot, you know? It's really, really interesting, and also I joined another program for 2 intensive months on learning about that. And some of the things that I learned is, I didn't know anything about that before, 1 year ago, so this is like also new for me, and I'm still developing. But basically, this is a business canvas, and then here there are key things that I think you should consider, that's why I put it. So, which are going to be your partners? So you need to think about your partners can be doing something similar in your field, can be also something different, so can complement your idea. And if you are small, if you are starting small, your competition also can be your partners. So in Barcelona, I made almost all my competition my partners, because I'm quite, small startup consultancy company. So if there are people working similar than me and have similar values than me, I prefer to have them as partners and collaborate in projects than compete. And then the key activities that you're going to develop, the resources that you need for these activities. Sometimes you need investors, sometimes not, it depends. In the case of that consultancy, we don't need much income at the beginning, so we don't need investment. What is your value proposition? So it has to be, your idea has to be also unique and different than the other ones. So also when you compare with your competitors, you are doing, you want to make it different. So how do you sometimes you cannot compete with a big company because, for example, just a basic example. Imagine that you are making furniture and then you are competing with IKEA, and then in this case, they are making a lot, and it's quite cheap. So your value, your proposal value, will be like more handmade furniture, and you can sell it more expensive. You don't need to compete for the price. So this is also important to consider. And your customer relationships, how you're going to also to contact these customers and your clients. Like I use a lot LinkedIn and networking. For me, is the best to find clients. And yes, and Instagram as well is nowadays more and more. So it's a very good way to promote. But it all depends on your product or service that you are selling. Yeah, and of course, I also learn, I'm going to talk about now about finance or things like that, but you have also, of course, to learn if your business plan is sustainable over the long term, economically. And yeah, so I think also, I believe it's very important to consider is, so you have your client or the person who you want to sell the product or service. You need to know everything about that person, and you need to focus on one particular person. No, you cannot say, okay, I'm going to sell something to all ages, to all countries. You need to focus. So, for example, in my case, I was thinking, okay, I want to contact plastic companies that produce plastic. They have to be a small, medium, or large. So, okay, let's do a small or medium, because it's easier to approach them. And the person who manages that, so who I'm going to contact? I'm going to contact the marketing sector, so the marketing of the company. I'm going to contact the human resources, so the manager. So you need to think, this person, who is going to be which age, what does he think, see, feel, do, everything. So this is really, really important when you are developing your idea, because you have to sell it to somebody, not to everybody. And of course, the competition, as I was saying that, this is, don't compete with me in chess. This is when I was a child. And now I'm not so competitive anymore. I like more to collaborate. But it's important to know your competition, to know what they do, what you can learn from them. This is an example of how to, so when you have your competition, you have to evaluate how you differentiate from them. So this is just an example of, I guess you know, this Tinder and OkCupid, some of these things. Then you need to see if, in this case, this example is like, it goes to the general audience, so it goes to a niche, very specific, no? And it goes, this committed relationship, so how do you differentiate there? There are so many of these applications, for example, and how are you differentiated? How you can be different from all this that is in the market? Yeah, and create the best team. So, and the best thing for me is that you complement to each other. So in our case, we are a startup that has all marine scientists. So sometimes I had the need to have somebody that knows about marketing, somebody very specific that knows about the plastic industry. So it depends on your product or service. It's important to complement each other and to be also involved. Like, I understand that you are, most of you don't want to involve full time to the startup because you have to invest a lot of time, and maybe economically you cannot manage to because at the beginning it's very hard economically. So then what is important is to also to decide if you are going to work to be in the startup full time, you jump straight to the ocean, or just part time. And then you can combine with your research. I know so many people who has the startup, and there are so many good formulas, so there is no unique one. And also I wanted to motivate you to do this, because a lot of learning process, and I have learned a lot I'm for 1 year in one co-working space, and it's really exciting because you are learning about people who does different fields, different things, and you always find collaborators, people who is interested in your project, and it's really exciting movement. Yeah. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, we can discuss it later. I hope you jump into the ocean.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So before jumping into the ocean, we need to know how much funding is there. So our next speaker would be Brigitte Braunweiser, if I pronounce it right. She's from Austrian Business Agency. She's the director for startups for Central and Eastern Europe at ABA, or Austrian Business Agency, which is basically the investment promotion agency from Austria. In this role, she actually advises and supports foreign companies who are seeking to start business in Austria. We earlier collaborated with the Austrian chapter last year, so she had a fantastic talk, and a lot of our members actually got motivated and start up. Before I leave it up to you, could you please go to Slido, and there is a questions. So have you actually ever considered about public funding for your startup? Or do you know about that? So please answer that. I think the code is 3525, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Mustafa. May I just ask, actually, who of you is coming to Vienna for the Congress, and who of you is actually based in Austria? Oh, sorry. Okay, who is just temporarily visiting Austria? Okay, so the majority. Okay, wonderful. Because then allow me please to say a few facts about the research, business and startup location Austria for general introduction so that we are all on the same page. Of course you know Austria, but do you actually also know the business side of Austria? Because Austria is best known for skiing, tourism, and things like that, but it's the business side known of Austria. For example, Infineon rings a bell, right? Large German corporate semiconductor, one of the leading chip makers. They are investing 1.6 billion euros in the most southern province of Austria, in Carinthia. Why are they doing this? Because they find here talent, international talent. One example. Another example. TT Tech. Is TT Tech known? No? It actually started out as a spin-off of the Technical University of Vienna. By now, they're very sizable, believe me. And they have been extremely successful cooperating with large corporates, such as Audi. But recently also Samsung, they joined a cooperation with Samsung, where Samsung jointly is investing 70 million euros in further development of software and technology in the area of autonomous driving. Why am I bringing all these examples? Because I think it's important to highlight here the fact that Austria, as a research and business location, is very strong. It's not just tourism, but it's, believe me, really the corporate side, the business side of it, and the research side of it. We have in Austria, 1/3 of the Austrian GDP is based on industrial production, which is fairly high. It's as high as in Germany and as in Switzerland. And this is important to know because it makes you realize that a fairly expensive business location like Austria can only remain competitive if there is an investment in research and development. And thanks to research and development, this is being turned into innovation, into innovative products and services that are competitive also going forward. And that is also a fact that I want to highlight here. Back in 2000 or so, Austria probably was at best EU average with regards to spending on research and development. Over the course of the last 15 years, Austria has caught up, and not only caught up, but actually surpassed many other European Union member countries. And Austria is now spending 3.19% of the GDP for research and development, and is really up there together with the Scandinavian countries in terms of research and development. What has this all to do with this session on entrepreneurship? I want to mention this so that you see also where the Austrian government is spending the taxpayers' money with regards to the subsidies and with regards to the incentives. If you consider starting your own startup, if you consider to do a spin-off from your research-based work, what do you need? And I think the speaker before me already shared some of these experiences. But I think these 6 things that I have put out there, I think are the key ingredients that you need in order to be also successful with your startup. I want to emphasize, you need a market and you need clients. That, in my opinion, is the biggest priority, because without that, it doesn't make sense to create a startup. And here I think, when you look at it from the Austrian perspective, the startups that start here, they do it because many use Austria as the test market for the larger DACH region, for the larger German-speaking markets. Altogether, the DACH region is 100 million consumers, as well as a very strong industrial basis, as I have pointed out before. Austria, Germany, Switzerland, there you have 1/3 of GDP contributed by the industrial production sector, so you have also a strong B2B base here. You have, in terms of purchasing power, probably the DACH market is the one with the strongest purchasing power if we are back to the B2C segment. Central location, of course. The other key ingredient is, I guess, when you do a startup, is the talent. And it's not just about yourself as the founder, but it's probably also about finding your co-founders, as well as later on, hopefully also talented employees. Here, again from the Austrian perspective, what I can say is, especially Vienna is such an international hub. By now, Vienna is the largest student city within the German-speaking area. Vienna boasts, correct me if I'm wrong, 180,000 students, something like that. And 1/3 of those are international students. So I think that is a strong asset here as well. Then, of course, you need financing, and I will perhaps say a few words about that and how I view the Austrian side here later, as well as funding. And by funding, I mean more the incentives, the subsidy programs. And then, last but not least, with support, I mean organizations that you can turn to get advice, information, tips, recommendations, and things like that. I will also address this later. In Austria, we have a system of so-called competence centers of excellence. These are public-private partnerships where the universities, the research organizations, and the leading companies of a certain topic sector work together and jointly agree on a 5-year research program. Each of those partners contributes their own in-kind resources, and then jointly they work on these research projects, and the outcome then is being turned into practical innovations. The companies, the leading companies that participate can use that then to apply that research results for the products and services. These Comet centers, we have 42 of them throughout all of Austria, usually attached to some of the universities or research institutes. They are really a good, I would say, docking base for companies and also for spin-offs and startups. In Austria, we also have a system of so-called A+B centers. This is basically incubators, usually also where the universities contribute, as well as sometimes it's the city that is also involved and so forth. For Vienna, for example, the A+B center is INITS, which is a partnership, the city of Vienna, the technical university, the other universities and so forth. And we have 7 of those also spread throughout Austria. And usually these centers are also a good place to turn to discuss your startup project or startup idea. A few more words about the talent, and I think this is key because potential investors, they look at, for them it's most important who is the founder team and are all the skills needed and rather, I would say, complementary skills among the founder teams, are they there? Here in Austria, especially in Vienna, because of Austria is a very attractive country to live in, you have strong international talent that loves to live here. And I think in general, you can find also co-founders. There are also programs out there. For example, INETS is doing a program where they match founders with co-founders so that the team, the founder team, then will have all the skills needed in one. Actually, here we say 195,000 students even in Vienna, 30% of them international students, yes. What about financing? And I think here, Austria in particular, Vienna in particular, but probably also throughout Europe, what we have seen is there has been a dynamic growth of financing available for startups. The logos that you see on this slide depict a little bit the Austrian scene. In Austria, the largest VC fund is Speed Invest. And Speed Invest by now actually has ventured out into 5 funds for certain sectors. They have one in fintech area, they have one by now even on Industry 4.0 applications and so forth. And what's important and interesting there, I guess, also with Speed Invest is that once again, they bring in corporate partners to guide them also on the sector-specific funds. For example, for the fintech fund of Speed Invest, they are partnering with Raiffeisen, which is the largest banking group in Austria, as well as Unica, which is the largest insurance group in Austria. Funding. According to the Austrian Startup Monitor, 55% of the Austrian startups responded that they actually got subsidies. So I think, again, from an Austrian perspective, I think there's lots of funding out there. Yes, it's a little bit fragmented and it means work to collect all the information, where to get what. It's not just one source of funding that you can turn to, but I think there's lots out there. My own advice would be focus rather on the markets and on the clients, and funding is nice to have, but of course, it requires, you have to do a project application, you have to do reporting. It slows you down, for sure. But it's nice to have, but I would say to any startup founder, rather focus on a good product, on the market, on the client. And the best startups I know have been also those who have been immediately been able to sell the product and early on verified that there is a demand for the product or service in the market. 55% in Austria say they have received public funding. 2 years ago already, the Forbes magazine titled Austria the up-and-coming early-stage investment capital of Europe, because sometimes it's even said that in Austria we have too much funding opportunities out there. So the startups don't need to get to the market quickly. They can get lots of funding here. What Austria, I think, also offers is that for technology-intensive companies, there is good subsidies out there. We have a system where you have two things. You have a tax incentive, the so-called research premium. It's a tax credit that you get for every euro that the company spends on research and development. It needs to be R&D in the sense of the EU definition, but if you fulfill that, then you get this tax credit of 14%. Plus, you get the direct subsidy programs that you can apply for on a project basis. The tax credit, I should say, is probably one of the reasons why Infineon is investing in such a big style in Carinthia, because for their investment in that facility down there, they combine it with a full-fledged research program, a new competence center is being instituted and things like that. In Austria we have, as I said, a highly differentiated funding system out there. We have, on the one hand, the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, which is focusing to support R&D projects at the national level. There you have approximately €500 million on subsidies that is being spent to support the companies undertaking the research. And here I mean large corporates, medium, small-sized companies, as well as startups. So also startups can apply for this R&D subsidy to the Austrian Research Promotion Agency. As soon as you have more or less the prototype ready, from the prototype to the really the market launch then of the product, there we would rather be then at Austria Wirtschaftsservice. This is the funding and financing body at the national level for also startups. They offer the pre-seed and seed financing instrument, for example. Those two agencies are at the national level, Austria being a highly federal country. We also have programs available at the regional level. For Vienna, it's the city of Vienna, or in the other 8 regions of Austria, you have economic development agencies that also offer support programs. Last but not least, for PhD candidates that are working at Austrian universities' research institutes, there is also the so-called spin-off fellowship available, where again there is support for the individual researcher to prepare his spin-off, his startup, by getting such a fellowship for 6 months to really turn the research into a product or a service. Last but not least, for those who come from third countries, there is also a relevant category under the Red, White, Red card, which is the residence and work permit scheme for third country nationals to then actually found the startup or the spin-off here in Austria. Coming back to that, these, in my opinion, are the key ingredients to have a successful formation of your startup. The last point is actually the support point. And here I want to then say a few words also about what organizations like ABA can provide. But before that even, we've tried to depict a little bit the Austrian startup ecosystem by showing here a little bit all the stakeholders and in the Austrian startup ecosystem. So in case you want to learn more about that, actually upstairs is a colleague of mine, and we have many more materials on the Austrian startup ecosystem up there if you want to get more information. Organizations like ABA, what can we do for you? Well, if you want to explore further the business conditions that the Startup Research and Business Location Austria offers, feel free to turn to us, drop us an email, make contact with us in any way, and we will try to understand what you need, provide first-hand information, and then if it is a specific project that you want to explore further, then we are there to definitely offer also customized support. ABA is the agency at the national level, so we often work as a first entry point. As I mentioned, as soon as it becomes clear where you want to go within Austria, we bring in also our regional colleagues, and the next speaker will be the colleague from the Vienna Business Agency already, which is kind of the agency specifically for Vienna. But by all means, make contact and let us know what it is that you need. Yeah, and with that, I hopefully didn't use up too much time and hand over to Karin.
Yes, hello, thanks for having me. You've heard about how to start a startup. You've heard about the Austrian market. Now you're going to hear about the money, basically, what makes the world go round. I'm here from the Vienna Business Agency. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about funding opportunities here in Vienna. And of course, I'd like to start out with questions as well, asking who is already based here in Vienna and does have a business here. Lots of opportunities for startups and spin-offs then. Is anyone of you got inspired of starting a business here in Vienna, in this beautiful city? Excellent. I'll be here later on as well. And last question, does any one of you have done applied research projects with businesses here in Vienna? Or applied research projects in general? Very good, because listen up, we've got something for you as well. First of all, if you're thinking about starting a business in Vienna, we've got a unique opportunity to even support you if you haven't established your business yet. Which means if you do not have a business yet, it will be okay to apply for funding at the Vienna Business Agency, meaning your spin-off, if you want to come here. Please be also aware that if you're planning to do cooperative projects, again, applied research projects with businesses here in Vienna, research institutions and universities in Vienna are welcome to apply for funding as well. And as I said, startups, which means we are also looking for young entrepreneurs in particular, will have benefit bonuses in all our application funding programs as well. We're trying to offer something for everybody, basically, which means, of course, being here at the university, I'd like to take that opportunity and, in particular, recommend our R&D funding program. As the name might suggest, we're looking here for R&D projects. Again, applied research is what we are looking for. This program is basically call-based, which means that we have a call opening up every 6 months, with a new focus topic. Currently, we've got a call on urban production, which means that we are looking for projects who are trying to do urban production more sustainable, more innovative, open up until April 10th. But apart from that, I'd highly recommend our next call, starting on May 8th, going to be called From Science to Products, because this is where we're looking for ideas from peer-reviewed publications, for example, patents, who are trying to turn that into a business model, meaning from science to products, that if you are interested in turning your research idea into a business model, this is the call for you. Yes, as I said, the money is important. How much money are we actually talking about? Being a very having a very high technical risk in R&D, this is one of our biggest funding programs. Up to 500,000 euros per project are available. But also, this is why I've mentioned and asked if you're doing applied research projects as well. We've got another funding program called R&D Collaboration Initiation. This is a bit of a complicated name, but what it basically means is if you're looking for R&D partners here in Vienna, if you're doing projects and want to apply for international funding, such as Horizon 2020, for example, this funding program can support your Viennese partner, can support your research partner if you have a project with a research organization here in Vienna. And it will be up to 30,000 euros for your Viennese partner. Again, we are a regional funding agency. But this is a very unique opportunity because I'm not aware that there are too many programs like that around. So please check that out as well. In particular, the gentleman who sort of raised his hand when I asked for applied research projects. Another funding program I'd like to point out is we're not only talking about R&D, but also if you've already got a prototype or proof of concept and want to get your product market ready, this would be the funding program for you. As the technical risk is usually not as high as with R&D, it's up to 200,000 euros. And means that you have to new or significantly improved product, service, or process. Being innovative is, of course, key. And to take it even a step further, if you want to expand your market, want to conquer new markets, want to go international, we've got a new funding opportunity for trade fairs. And that will be up to 10,000 euros, open all the time. Or if you want to do an international marketing strategy on how to get to new markets, there is another funding program called Internationalization Focus as well, meaning to go even that step further after you've got your product on the market already. Yeah, basically I highly recommend to contact us. We do consultation services, of course. We do can consult you if you're interested in funding, public funding from the city of Vienna. Of course, the business model itself will be the content criteria, the success criteria, the main success criteria. Of course, the development perspective as well on how you want to actually make money with your idea. And goes without saying, project planning is another success criteria. Please stop by and make an appointment with us. Schedule a personal consultation to find out more on how to get funded. But it's not only the money. If you're interested in coming to Vienna, we don't only have funding programs, we also provide a network service. We've got a whole department who's just trying to find new networks and partners for you. Of course, we do have office spaces as well. It's also important to not just have the money, but also the place to go. We also do free workshops, for example, on how to start a business. How does the Austrian tax system works? How do I write a business plan? This is all for free, by the way. And last but not least, I also recommend our expert center, which is sort of the first address, a starting point. If you want to come here, they can help you with anything, starting from finding a Spanish-speaking doctor for your spouse coming along to how does the work permit system work, how does Social Security here work in Vienna. They're a good point, a first contact point, if you're interested in coming here. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Ingrid Kelly. She did his PhD from University of Cambridge, and then she worked as a patent attorney. She is at University of Vienna, and then moved into the Institute of Science and Technology in Klosterneuburg. So she will talk about the patent issues.
Very good.
Okay.
I will take that.
You can.
Okay, thank you very much, Mustafa. And before I launch into this, I just want to say I think it's wonderful that so many of you here are specifically thinking about starting a company. And I think if we'd held this event 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, we wouldn't have seen this. I think there's a real sea change in Austria, but in Europe in general, and I think it's a wonderful thing. So as Mustafa said, I'm currently working at IST Austria. You can see our campus here outside Vienna, a nice green campus in the Vienna woods. And it's a very new research institution, so we're celebrating the first 10 years this year. It's a blue skies research institute, very fundamental research. But from the very beginning, the idea was to couple that with support for startups, with innovation, and trying to contribute to the broader innovation ecosystem. So across the road, there is a technology park under construction, and very importantly, a venture fund has been set up by IST with certain partners. And the idea is to fund very, very early stage tech startups. So people like yourself who are really at the very beginning of thinking about starting a company, or maybe just having founded a company, this is a resource you can tap into as well, because this is not limited to our institute, it's not limited to Austria, it's open to all of you. Please come and see me if you're interested, but essentially we offer sort of pre-seed seed funding, and we provide a supportive network of mentors, of experts in different areas to help you through the jungle. So my role in this, of course, is more on the intellectual property side. So I've seen how academic research groups deal with intellectual property and how we can find an IP strategy for those projects. But also now I've had a lot to do with startups in their early stages and how their IP strategies develop. And what I've seen, of course, and this is no great surprise, is that most founders have a very superficial understanding of IP. Does this matter? Well, I argue it does matter, because all of these estimates say that approximately 80 or 90% of the value of tech startups lies in the so-called intangible assets. Now, those are the people in the startup, but it's also the intellectual property in the startup. So the better you can plan your IP strategy, the better you can identify your IP, the better the chances that your venture will succeed. So I thought I'd very briefly go over a reminder of what intellectual property is and isn't, and then talk about some of the common mistakes or pitfalls that we've encountered when we're dealing with early stage startups. Intellectual property is something very artificial. It's basically a tool set up by governments to promote creativity and promote innovation for a limited time period. What it is not is a license to do something. It's actually a license to prevent others from doing something that you've decided is your unique selling point, if you like. And what I've done here is I've borrowed 2 slides from the European Patent Office, and there are great resources on that website. There are much longer presentations, very detailed, or also general presentations on IP, and I would urge you to have a look at those. But in essence, just to give you a reminder, patents cover technical inventions. They can be products, they can be processes, they can be uses. Utility models are a bit similar. There are a kind of mini patent available in some countries. Patents clearly are very relevant to not all, but a very large number of startups. Copyright is also relevant to many startups. We tend to think of copyright in terms of music or books, that kind of thing. But copyright, for instance, also exists in computer code. So if your startup is reliant on code, you have automatically rights that are generated as soon as the code is written. That's copyright. Allied to that, there is a right in Europe called the database right. So if you, for instance, in a big data project, have accumulated certain data in a very organized way, you're protected against somebody extracting that organized data and reusing it. Other forms of IP are probably more familiar to the general public. Trademarks, we'll come on to that in a minute. Registered designs protect the external aesthetic appearance of objects. And one which has been, I think, neglected in the past is trade secrets. Now, trade secrets are not registrable in the traditional sense, but more recently, both in the US and in the EU, there have been changes in the law to harmonize protection here, acknowledging that this can be of real value to a business. Everybody's heard the story about the Coke formula being held confidential, but for instance, if you have, let's say, an algorithm, you could patent that, the use of that algorithm, but patents get published. That's always happens. So your algorithm is then in the public domain. So you need to think carefully about what do I want getting out there and what do I want to keep that is more value when it's held confidentially. And if you can identify those things and keep them under lock and key, only allow people who need to know to access those things, then you have a valuable asset in terms of confidential know-how. So the first thing you're going to want to do, and it can be really fun, is to decide on the name of your company. But it is worth spending a bit of time thinking about the name, because once you start using the name, you're going to build up a reputation. You're going to build goodwill in that name. So if you get it wrong, you're going to have to rebrand, and then you're kind of back to square one. So you need to think about the name of your company, maybe the name of projects or products that you're going to make, and you want to make sure also that the domain name is available, ideally the .com version, of course. So first question is, can you register your trademarks? You need to then go into those databases, and you can do this yourselves. You don't need to automatically go to a trademark attorney from the beginning, but you go along into these public databases, for instance, the European Union trademark database, and see, is there anything out there with a similar name? And particularly anything with a similar name in a similar field of activity. If not, then you may be able to register your trademark. But you need also to be aware that there are perhaps confusingly similar marks out there, and you also want to try and avoid cases where you don't have the same name, but you have something that could be confused with the name used by another company. And the last thing you want to be experiencing is some big company chasing you for lots of money or bringing you to court. So it is worth taking a bit of time to work on this. So how is intellectual property then transferred into your startup? Some of you may already have gone through this process. I don't know, has anyone here signed a license agreement with a university recently? No, yeah, okay, well, at least one. Good. So these are very, very standard agreements. And the fact of the matter is universities are not allowed to subsidize companies. So you're going to have to negotiate an arm's length agreement if you're taking IP out of an academic institution into your startup. Generally speaking, if the university holds patents, they will keep those, and they will give you what's called an exclusive license. You don't own the IP, but you're the only one who's allowed to use it in effect. And in return, the university, of course, will expect something. And that might be a stake in your company, it might be money, or it might be a mixed model. If the university expects license fees, they can be one of many different varieties here. Not all agreements will have all of these types of fees involved. Upfront fees are usually waived for startups because that's right at the very beginning when startups have no money. Annual fees are more common. They're intended to encourage the startup to actually use the IP or give it up. Royalties are extremely common, so that's where you sell products and a certain percentage of the income from that product sale then goes back to the IP owner. Milestone payments, common in the pharma industry, where you have a very, very long development phase, and at various points along that development, significant progress is achieved. And there's usually a payout at that point in time to the IP owner. For instance, when a clinical trial recruitment is completed. And finally, if the license holder then further sub-licenses to somebody else, some of that money will also find its way back to the original IP owner. So as I said, I'd like to talk about 3 common mistakes or pitfalls that I've seen. One is about the ownership of the IP. Now, that could be IP that's transferred from somebody else, but you want to be absolutely sure that you've got all the necessary rights. I mean, you've probably experienced yourself, some universities work together, and very often that means you have multiple owners on any particular piece of IP, and you need a license or you need consent from all of those owners, because at least in most of the world, you can't do anything with your exclusive patent license unless you have consent from all the owners. So you need to be absolutely sure you have got each and every one of those owners to give either a license or some kind of consent to you. And then when you have a company that's up and running, a startup, you're going to have very likely some work that you're going to outsource. Now that might be, for instance, creating a new logo, or it might be outsourcing to somebody who's going to write you some code. Again, that needs to be formalized. You need to have an agreement in place which says, we're paying for this work, and all of the results belong to us. Because otherwise, and this is the default, the ownership lies with the creator. So those intellectual property rights in code or in a logo or whatever don't belong to you unless you have specifically said, we have to own them. Another particular complication is a very common scenario. Startups, people are very often not full-time, as Patricia mentioned. So you may have multiple jobs and multiple employers at the same time, or you might be self-employed as well as at the company. And so you need to be sure that nobody else has a claim on your IP, because later down the line, one of them could come back and say, well, you filed a patent, your name is on that. I was your employer at the time, so I own it. So again, you need to talk to these people and say, do we agree that if I create something in the startup, it's mine, or it's the startups and not the universities, for instance. Get all those things clarified early on. The second thing is freedom to operate, which is a phrase I guess you've probably heard of. A lot of people naively think, hey, we'll file a patent and then we're done. That's great, we're all sorted, we have our IP issues all organized. It's great to have a patent, but what it doesn't do is insulate you against patent infringement. So if you have other people with patents, you can have your own patent and still infringe somebody else's patent. So you might have a patent on a 5-step process. If somebody has a patent on step 2, you're going to infringe it by performing step 2 of the 5 steps. So you need to be aware of those potential hurdles, about those potential patents. And I'm not suggesting that you go out tomorrow and find a patent attorney and pay, 10, 15,000 euros to get an in-depth analysis done. That might be necessary at some point, but from the very beginning, you need to be looking yourself in these free patent databases, for instance, like a SPASnet, and look and see who is out there, what are they doing? Does this look risky to me? Should I flag this one? Should I watch what happens with this one? Because the sooner you're aware, the sooner you can take appropriate action like redesigning your project and so on. Freedom to operate analysis is the name given to this in-depth analysis that you may need to do down the line. But I think the main point here is many people think, if I filed a patent, I'm clear and everything's fine, and that's not true. This is an additional check that you need to do over and above checking whether you have your own IP protected. And the last point, and my last slide, is about confidentiality agreements. As researchers, we love to share. I mean, that's what it's all about. Talking to people, exchanging ideas, finding new avenues for cooperation. And in a startup, I imagine that's the same thing. You want to tell people about what you're doing and how wonderful it is. But there are risks associated with that. For instance, if you reveal your business plans to somebody, it may be that that information gets back to the competition, so somebody will try to do something very similar to you. If you reveal some of your unpublished technical information, again, that can be misused by somebody else, and they may, for instance, even file a patent. I mean, this happens, and that patent could actually block you. So you don't want to be helping the competition by just disclosing information too freely. And of course, as I'm sure you know, if you disclose technical information that's unpublished, you rule out later patenting that information, because patents are only granted for new things. So if it's not new because you told Joe Bloggs something and you didn't put any restriction on him, that's like a publication in patent terms. And how do we get around this? From the very early days, I think it's a good practice for you as startup founders to have a standard confidentiality agreement or so-called non-disclosure agreement, which you use routinely with commercial and technical partners that you're talking to. And that gives you a degree of protection whereby it's clear then on both sides that what you're talking about has to be respected as confidential, and does give you then some legal protection in the event that you would need to go to court and try and implement that agreement. So just some thoughts. I hope these are useful to you. If anybody wants to come and talk to me afterwards about IST Cube, I have some cards here, or about IP and startups, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. So our next speaker is Nicolas. So Nicolas is CEO and founder of a startup based in Belgium. So this startup is actually working to bridge the expectation gap between the employer and employee. She's also a guest speaker at the University of, guest lecturer at the University of Groningen. Just to have a bit of background, at MCAA we are also working with the Flanders government with CASI in a specific project. So the result of that project, the expectation gap between the employer and employee, will be shown at today's session, supporting researcher mobility. But here, Nicolas will basically talk about how he started his startup. So the floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you very briefly, concisely, but I hope very tangibly about my key do's and don'ts. The key do's and don'ts that I've learned over 15 years of being involved in advising, managing, founding, financing startups and scale-ups, especially in the low countries, Belgium, the Netherlands. Voilà. First, just 1 second about my background, so you understand where I'm coming from. As I state, I love to be where people, technology, and money collide head-on, because that's where the action is. That's where progress is made. If one of the three is lacking, you can't get ahead with your product, with your company, with your client base. I've studied economy myself. I graduated in 2000, which was the top of the NASDAQ.com bubble, which was a very painful experience for a tech fund manager, basically. Then I went into finance and consulting, analyzing and strategically advising startups. As you eloquently put, I'm a guest professor at the University of Groningen, teaching on topics like financing strategy, negotiation, and corporate venturing. And in 2014, I founded my own startup to bridge the expectations gap between talent and employers. Because there is a single language to talk about hard skills, but there isn't one to talk about expectations. Voilà. If I could only show one slide, I have four. This would be the one slide. The common misconception is that startup life is always flashy. The path to success is a narrow and clear path, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Not to undermine your motivation, it's exactly the opposite. I want to see you succeed. And that's why it's very important, and that's the second point, the persistence. But first I'm going to tackle the first point, product, also a point that some of the earlier speakers today also touched upon. When I advise a lot of researchers, specifically in life sciences, biotechnology spheres, medical technology, and I had to convince them that they had to change their mindset in order for their company to get funded. That wasn't always easy, because they said, hey, I want to be involved in the base research part of it. Yes, but your financiers, especially on the private side, they want to see a market for your products. So you have to give me a hand. You have to explain to me, in layman's terms, what the technology does and how it could be applied. Yeah, but nobody knows that for sure. I don't care. We have to build a narrative that supports your mission and vision and supports the narrative that can convince financiers to see a big market potential for your technology when it's brought to market from an early stage with the funding. How do you do that? Is by start to think, yeah, who will be my clients, who will actually be using, even if the context doesn't yet exist for your technology to be sold that way. It's all about thinking and retracing back to the now and telling the right story. 2, persistence. Oh, you better love to learn failing. And I don't mean failing as the company going bankrupt. No, small experiments that fail can learn you a whole lot. And I learned much more about discussing my failures with other like-minded souls, also in other verticals, than talking about success. Success is easy. Talking about it. Talking about failure is much harder. It's much more gratifying than if you learn something from it and you avoid the mistakes next time around. Trust me, you'll soon learn to love failing when you see the benefit of talking about it. Dare to talk about it. Reach out, network. 3, profit. In the end, again, specifically with regards to private funding, angels, especially venture capital funds, they're in it for the money. So you need to walk the walk, talk the talk, or find someone, that's point 4, that does that for you. It's a different kind of language that's spoken in financing than in basic research. Trust me on that. Serve the hype. Yesterday, I sat next to a lovely lady at the dinner, and she was doing business research into basic research into plastic-eating bacteria. I told her it's a good example of how you need to be ready to read the tea leaves and jump on an opportunity when it manifests itself. I told her, imagine there's a new huge oil spill. Like, remember a number of years ago there was a huge oil spill because an oil rig got detached in the Gulf of Mexico. That that is the moment where you need to be ready to start your company and send out one-pagers. Do it now. Create a one-pager now. And be ready when the opportunity arrives, when the hype arrives, and people, companies, public administrations will be ready to give you the money that you might otherwise have a hard time getting. Surf the hype. Dare to do that. Last point, people. Get out. Talk to people. And not just people in the same line of work, in the same vertical as you, but also people in other verticals that might have approached the same kind of problem on a meta level, financing something that's hard to get financed. Finding the right team members, like the proverbial senior Java programmers, which are like a black swan. Everybody knows they exist, but they're very hard to find. How can you get them? How do you get them involved? And the most important thing, I leave that for last. I made every mistake in the book when I started my own startup, and I managed to survive by realizing, hey, even though I advised lots of startups before and helped them to not make the mistakes, when you're doing it yourself, you're focused on your business. You're not looking from the outside in. You need people to protect you from the obvious. Find trusted advisors early on, like the people who spoke before me. If you get support, don't be hesitant, it will pay off. Voilà, that was my 5 minutes. I'd love for you to connect, Twitter, LinkedIn, or meet me at the Kazi stand upstairs. Voilà, thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas, for a very motivating speech. So, our next speaker is Pavlo. Pavlo is the chair of Bridging Business and Science Working Group. He also awarded the Best Innovator Award yesterday night from one of the MCAA Career Award. So, Pavlo.
Thank you. HDMI? No, that's not there. Just 1 minute, 1 second, sorry. Hi, so I'll just spend a few minutes to describe what we do in our working group. So I'm a chair of Bridging Science and Business Working Group of MCAA. In this group, we strive to bring together research and business of not just MCAA, but maybe the whole Europe and the world. And we try to share knowledge and topics from both worlds, from academia and business, and if possible, do it for free. And beside that, we also aim to create a community for entrepreneurs of MCAA and to join events which are relevant to this topic, and also engage in discussion with policymakers in MCAA and other groups as well. And I'll just say just have a few slides on what we've done, what we'll do in this year as well. So I became a chair in 2017, and we had the first event in Gdańsk together with the Polish chapter. It was attended by around 30 people. And it was our first attempt to talk about this issue of how to connect science and business. And it was a good platform for networking, so we did see some actual results from people talking to each other in this event. And the main focuses were the intellectual property rights and design thinking. Then we expanded the framework and we went, so the event was quite successful, I think. So we went to Paris, Eclay, and then 1 year later we had another event which was a bit bigger. So it was around 80 people this time, and we even had parallel sessions, so we had enough scope to do that on marketing, investment, funding, startup experiences, entrepreneurship as such. once again, it was a good platform for networking, and I think even some jobs were received there as well. And now, so we are now going even bigger. So this year we have 2 events. The first one will be in Kima Hill Academy in Ukraine. I come from Ukraine as well, so it's my bit of my try to give something back to my community as well. It will be, sorry for the slide, but it will be 19th and 20th of April, and we expect to receive around 70 to 100 people from Ukraine to talk about the issue that basically in the country there's no framework for science, business communication, collaboration as such. And we strive to attract around 70 or so students who have some ideas that could become startups. And we'll fund them as well to come and talk about that. And then a few months later, we'll do another one in Berlin. So it's not in June, sorry, but in July. And then in Berlin, it will be more of a discussion on a well-established startup hub, which is quite known. So it will be more of a place network for people who already have their startups, maybe also to discuss how others can also do and use this hub. And the last thing which we are doing right now, which is quite active, if you're an MC member, you probably get emails from me once in a while where I ask you to join a webinar. So it's our idea of a low investment, high profit thing which we do. So we have a platform where anybody more or less can share their knowledge, share their experiences on the bridging science and business topic. It's online, so you don't have to go anywhere, don't have to spend any money, but it's just all about sharing knowledge and sharing experiences. If you want to be a speaker, you can also drop us an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo, for the very short introduction. So may I invite all the speakers to join us on the stage? I know we have less time, but it's a lunch break, and I'm sure you will have to queue there. So let's talk so that in future we can have more money for our startup. So I would go directly on to the audience. If anyone has any questions, okay. Natalie.
Hi, thank you all for all the nice talks. My question is very general, so I think anyone from the panel can answer. I'm a bit worried that we have really great scientists, but they might not see the value of their research. Is that possible that some of the scientists are actually missing that some of the research can actually be turned into a profitable business? Is there a lack of business education for scientists? Because what we are seeing is lots of scientists are making business and they have to learn a lot before they can actually put their business up.
Anyone from the panel would like to answer?
If I switch this on. You're absolutely right. I think in my role as a tech transfer manager, it's a fairly random thing. You're reliant on people coming to you mostly with their ideas. So they have to already have an idea that they have something commercially applicable in their hand, but they're not equipped necessarily to do that. So I do think that kind of business education, that awareness of innovation is something that should be emphasized in our education system at undergraduate level, but certainly at postgraduate level, because absolutely, I mean, opportunities are being missed left, right, and center.
Can I just add this to, oh, okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to give one example. When Google's Sergey and Larry were in their dorm in Stanford, it took venture capitalists, whoa, this is strange. It took venture capitalists 6 months to convince them that they didn't need to sell the product for profit, Google's search engine, but that they should sell it for free and give it away for free. And if those venture capitalists weren't there to advise them, to guide them, Google would have never become the company, the most famous company in the world, especially one of the harbingers of connecting digital information. So it's all about connecting and finding people people, like, for example, tech transfer officers, but also potential financiers, and talk to them. Throw it out. You can find the good from the bad in the questions they ask you and the solutions they come up.
And I think, in my opinion, what's important is also that perhaps you know yourself best, you know your strengths. And perhaps it's better to find a co-founder who has the complementary skills, who has the business acumen, if you feel like you don't have the entrepreneurial spirit as much. And that's why I think platforms where, let's say, the technical university is cooperating with the University for Economics, and there is a matchmaking being made to find co-founders. Perhaps also these kind of initiatives you should look into more carefully if you feel yourself you do not possess all the skills that are needed to turn your idea into success. So I think sometimes by finding the right co-founder, you can also kind of increase your reach.
I think, Karin, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to add, because you've mentioned that I think you did some sort of study where you found out that mentorship is basically what researchers need, and I just wanted to add
yeah, exactly. So
mentorships plus role models, I guess.
Exactly. So we actually have a mentorship platform, so it's both for academia and industry. Any other questions from audience?
Hi. I actually have a question about patents. It's two-part. I'm not sure if they're the same thing or not, but what would happen if, let's say, I develop product A at a university and then move out to the private sector and develop product B that's not the same as product A, but it's based on it? Or if I develop a product that's based on an already patented product that's also different, not quite the same, but it's based more or less on the same technology or idea, what would happen then?
Well, a lot of people think that patents are based on revolutionary innovations. And in fact, most patents are innovations that build on earlier innovations. So the scenario you're talking about is a very common one. There's already something out there, and then there is an improvement on that technology. So it could well be that at a university you work on something, and then you start a company or move to a company and then work on a development of that innovation. And it could then be that there are two patents that come out of it. And there is a sort of interdependency, because depending on the exact constellation, it may well be that you can't produce product B without infringing the patent on product A. So even if you don't sell product A, you may have to get a license to the earlier patent in addition to the second one. So it depends a bit on who owns what, but at the end of the day, it's a very common thing that you have to get multiple licenses on a single product in order to get that freedom to operate I mentioned.
Hi, I'm Prashant. I'm a master's graduate of law and economics. I'm actually a patent attorney working in India. So your topic was quite relevant. I wanted to ask one thing as an advice. When startups come to us for advising on patent aspects and licensing aspects. So I work with law firms in India, and we have a lot of startups coming and approaching us. We have to tell them that the life cycle of patent is 20 years, and the shelf life of your product or your technology would be much less. And we have to tell them that the number of years it takes for patenting is long. However, nowadays in India, it's getting fast. For startups, there are more expedited procedures. People can get patents in as less than 6 months. We have seen those experiences. How does it happen in Austria and in Europe, where the technology startups, if you advise them about patents, how do you go telling them that whether you should just go with NDA, ensure that your product, your shelf life is taken, and what the money and investment is made complete use of it, and by the time your patent will be granted, maybe your product will be out of technology. So how do you go advise them going towards patents or towards confidentiality licenses and other things? Yeah.
Well, I think it's totally dependent on the the technical field you're talking about. At one extreme, you have pharma and biotech, where you have such a long development time. The fact that the patent will only be granted in 7 years is irrelevant.
Startups are generally IT and generally short shelf life technology.
Right, so there are plenty of startups who are developing something which, as you say, will have a short life cycle and then they'll be on to the next thing. Patents play different roles. I mean, you have patents that you intend to enforce, so you need to get to the point where there's a patent grant which you can then go to court with. But patents, for instance, are loved by investors. So if you're looking for investment in your company, it may be worthwhile to have a patent application on file, even if it never gets granted down the road. It's probably not a good idea to spend a huge amount of money on it, but I think it's a sign that you have something innovative, even if you never intend to go the whole way with it. The difficulty, I think, with going to patent law firms is they will want you to file a patent. I mean, they're not neutral, right? So I think it's important that a startup has its own thought-out strategy. For our particular technology, what makes sense? Should we be highly, highly selective? Should we try and make use of accelerated procedures to get certain key patents through as quickly as possible so we can enforce them? Or should we, as you say, just say, okay, we're going to rely on trade secrets, keep that information close to our chest, not reveal it unless we have an NDA in place that gives us some protection, and then use that money that we've saved for other things.
Thank you.
I want to ask Nicolas a question. You've been telling us that you've been in the 15 years in the business and you collected like a lot of knowledge, and then you started to start up your company like in 2016. 14. Why you have waited so long?
That's a very good question. So the question was why I waited so long to found my own company. I always thought that the platform to do good was bigger when I was working at an existing firm which already had a platform, had a network of resources, had great reach. But I always felt hamstrung over there. Things weren't moving fast enough. You couldn't do the innovative stuff fast enough. You couldn't choose the people who you were gonna work with. And that's why I eventually decided to go my own way. It's a good question, thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the session. It has been very interesting. And I wanted to ask a question based on Patricia's speech, but I guess that you all have a comment on this. Because you said that when you are starting, you are very small, and you have competitors that they are very big, and then you don't want to fight with them. So you join them as a partner. But my question is, why a big competitor will like to join as a partner with a small competitor? I mean, how do you approach this?
That's a very good question. So I'm trying to think and to answer. We have a start when we have a start with the company. Then we got. So how I started, that I didn't explain that. I started doing consultancies, and through my network, so actually the bigger companies, like for example WWF, they hire me for some specific things. So I think this is a best way at the beginning to approach them. So either doing a lot of networking, so they know if you have a specific skill that they may not have, because these big companies, a lot of times, they sub-hire other smaller companies, so this is quite common. And Also, if you have the idea of a project, that's another way that I approach. I approach, for example, another company that works on communication, on marine science communication in Barcelona. And we have a lot of things in common and we get on well, and this is also a small one in this case. So we have developed a project together. We are now in the process of developing. So I think this is a good way to partner, because in this case, this is another small company, and two small companies, they make something bigger. Of course, you have to keep your branding and your independence, so that's very important, and sometimes it's a bit tricky when you are doing this kind of partnerships and collaborations, but you have to differentiate. Like, for example, they focus on communication, we are more based on science, so then together we can work and create a better product or a better service. I don't know if I answered you the question. Yeah. Somebody has anything to add?
Hi, thank you very much for a really good discussion. So my question is to Nikolai. I'm putting together a scenario where you are working with a company and you are in charge of a department where you have to deal with clients and you have a lot of knowledge on the internal workings of that company. But like you said, you think of a way to do the same thing but do it better, and then you start your own company. So how does that work in terms of customers or clients who have dealt with you as a contact person for that company and now have to deal with you as a startup? So in terms of the competition between you as a startup and the parent company, how do you manage such relationships?
First of all, I was lucky that I delved into the HR tech space and I came out of the consulting space, so I didn't have any conflicts of interest as to that regard, but I advised quite a lot of entrepreneurs who couldn't be intrapreneurs in their own company to set up their own company. And there are two aspects. There's a human aspect and there's a legal aspect. The legal aspect is non-compete. Get good legal advice before you do anything. I'll tell you, in Belgium, for example, I can't recall any legal case where an employee has been successfully sued after leaving the company, except in very flagrant cases where he is foul-mouthing his previous employer, etc., etc. But it's something, depends on the jurisdiction. Two is the human aspect. I strongly believe in integrity. The world is much smaller than you think, and I believe, like the last question was answered, I believe in networking, teaming up with people. So I would always try to find an amicable solution, but I would start with the legal framework first. So, good question.
I have a specific questions to Karen and Brigitte, actually, because most of the attendees are here actually researchers. So for them, translating their entrepreneurship idea into a business is a big deal, and much bigger deal is to reflect that on the business proposal. So how important is actually the business proposal? Do the investor actually read it, and what is the importance? So if Karen could start.
Yeah, sure. Yes, it is very important because this is sort of the framework where you are trying to convince somebody to invest in you, to believe in you, whether it be an investor, a private investor, or a public funding agency. So yes, you have to be very convincing when it comes to your business model. When it comes to the business side, you have to show how you are going to earn money at the end of the day, even if it's research and if it's still early stage. You have to know who is your market, how you want to reach those people, what is your competition, of course, what is your USP, what is your unique selling point. All these things add up to how you want to convince somebody to believing in you and investing money in you. Yeah.
Perhaps just to add a little bit more, I think the investors, it's the pitch deck is the one thing, but what investors are really eager to see is that there is a convincing team behind this. If it's just one founder, it's always a little problematic, because if somebody happens to this one person, the whole thing is gone. So that's why I think teams with complementary skills are even sometimes more credible, I think. Smart mentors, experienced coaches that you somehow can also make part of your team are also very convincing. I think you need the mix. It's the mix that then will hopefully lead to the success. And if I may perhaps just also comment on this earlier question, why should corporates cooperate with startups? What's quite interesting, if again I may come in from the Austrian perspective, 3 years ago is when we had this big startup hype in Austria going on, and everybody was all about startups and whatnot in the media and so forth. What it has done is that large corporates in Austria all of a sudden started to create startup companies, co-innovation labs, whatever the title is that they gave these things. Why are they doing this? Because one thing is, of course, a PR effect. The largest energy provider, Vienna Energy, is cooperating with startups because they want to come across as innovative, as renewable energy, open for these kind of innovative technologies and so forth. But what it also is that corporates are fully aware that they can learn from the startups. Startups are much faster in their decision-making process. Startups are thinking in other ways than these large tanks are thinking about. And that's why I think what in Austria, at least, what we've seen is all sorts of possibilities for startups to knock on the doors of corporates. The corporates all of a sudden become more open for this kind of co-innovation process and for this kind of cooperation also. And that's why I think, even as a researcher, try it out. If you are determined, you will find a way to make your business idea worthwhile and turn it into a startup. But it requires the persistence that you also had as one of the piece or slide.
Maybe to sum it up, make use of that support system. There's so much available, and maybe a good starting point is talking with people you trust.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about the legal framework and what you think would be a good approach if you want to start a startup. There are different time points you will have to deal with legal issues. Do you think it would be a good idea to include a lawyer in your team from the very beginning on, or how did you manage the legal issues during the formation of your startup, but also later on?
I would never, for that reason, include a lawyer in your startup team. Basically, two reasons behind that. I found, and I have a lot of lawyer friends, they have learned to look at the world in black and white. When you move from basic research to navigating the treacherous troves of startup life, everything is gray. That's one. That's my personal experience, and I have a lot of lawyer friends. Two, for example, with my startup, we are in the EY innovation ecosystem. that is by EY in Belgium, but I'm sure that the people in Austria, for example, can also guide you to schemes like that, where you can get at very cheap rates, top-class legal advice by vertical experts, because you're not likely to stumble onto someone who has an illegal background and might be a perfect fit with your startup team and has the exact expertise that you're looking for at that time. So again, it's all about mentoring, networking, teaming up, using the networks and the resources. And I would go for one of the very big consultants with legal teams attached at a discount rate for startups.
I have a question for Pavlo, because you work with the MSc BSB working group, and you have seen a lot of our members started their own startup, and you personally was also involved in different initiatives. So what's your, if I ask you to tell you 3 important advice for the potential entrepreneurs here?
Yeah, I think you should use a network. So in my experience also it's quite important. At the moment I work in incubator Yes Delft, so it's backed up by TU Delft in the Netherlands, and so all these, if issues rise, we always get backup behind us. Don't be afraid to share knowledge, because we have this webinar series, and I think that's quite effective. So if you have if you look for partners, if you look for how to expand your horizons, I think if you share your experience and share your skills as well, then people come to you themselves, so you don't need to look for them as well sometimes. And yeah, and be creative or something.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussions from audience? Okay, so just to wrap it up, if you see our speakers today, we have experts on funding, we have experts on IP, and we basically then have 3 examples, 3 startups from 3 different countries. 2 of them are MCA member, so that gives you an idea that starting a startup, what Patricia said, that basically if you have the idea and if you're really motivated and passionate, just jump into the ocean. And there are services who are there to help you. So that's all. And let's thank the speakers and organize panelists. Thank you very much. So enjoy your